how to script the interactions. So it's not just about a passive experience, right? You see a movie or see a um, animation. You actually can interact with the content in the environment. For example, click a button, turn on, turn off the light, or switch the material, or open the door, right? These are the interactions. So you have to use a script, a program to control that. And today I like to talk mainly on the node-based programming. I'm not talking about Python, C++, C Sharp. Node-based programming. Here I have a read document for you guys. Is something you might already quite familiar with if you use Grasshopper, for example, or Dynamo. So this article basically discussed what are the pros and cons using node-based coding. Basically, instead of writing a syntax-based script, you drag the node, you link the node, you understand the data flow across the nodes. So this is the nature of node-based scripting. In some 3D program like 3ds Max or Maya or Unreal, when you create a material, it's actually a node-based shader network. So it's basically a link of different nodes. In Unreal, this is called Blueprint. Okay. In other program, for example, Houdini, which is really powerful visual effects software, you can render complicated, particle system. You can simulate dynamics of air explosion. So this is basically a node-based modeling process. It's very similar like Grasshopper. You have a procedure of actions. All the nodes can be linked, can be regrouped, can be swapped. So it's a pretty powerful way to create a model. All right, so this is the node-based programming. Back to my slide. Today I only have like one slide talk about this node-based programming. I wonder if any of you using like Scratch before. Any of you? Scratch? Yeah, Scratch is a really simple graphic interface for programming. I think for the kids, like for example, my daughter, she learned programs through Scratch when she was like 9 years old. So it's really push the scripting to the elementary school level, if you say that way. So the node-based programming for designers, for visual learners, this is really, really fast way. You can do complicated tasks. For example, we use Grasshopper and Dynamo, right? So this is an example. Houdini, shader network in Max, Maya. So there's many examples of this programming. So the question is, if I want to learn how to do this node-based programming blueprint in Unreal, how are we going to get started, right? And apparently this will take a long time, to understand hierarchies, understand the script, how the nodes interact to each other. Today, I just want to have a discussion, a high-level discussion, talk about the basics, the fundamentals of programming with Blueprint. It's nothing down to the details. It's all in the kind of general sense. Okay, so Blueprint. First thing I like to mention is in Unreal, there are many ways you can create interaction among objects. So if you put, let's say, several objects, this is called actors, right, in a level, you can control basically through these three different methods. So let me start them one by one. So the blueprint hosted at level blueprint. In the level blueprint level, it's kind of a weird way to say. The level blueprint is basically a blueprint associated with a map, right? So if you have, for example, a large number of actors, right, in a map, you can use level blueprint to call them to dictate the interactions among these actors. Right? So the place actually saved this interaction is in the map, in the level. That's the reason this is called level blueprint. Okay, it's a single place. You can have every single actor called in, and you can script the interactions among them. Give you one example. If I want to control a light bulb with a switch, right? So one way I can do through the level blueprint, I can actually show you this. This one. Right. So one way I can control that is I can load all the light bulbs actor into the level blueprint, and I will link a switch to a light in the level blueprint. Right. However, this could be a little bit trouble if you have, for example, many lights, many light bulbs, and many switch. So maybe one switch control multiple lights, or maybe multiple switch can control one light, right? So you can imagine if you have a very complicated interactions, level blueprint could become really complicated and quite difficult for other people to understand or debug. Right. So this is the limitations to use the level blueprint. The second way to use blueprint is called actor blueprint, or we call the blueprint class. Is basically embed the blueprint into individual actors. Right? It's not in the level, it's in the actors. I will also using this light bulb and the switch example. I could create an actor, right? This actor has a pair of objects, one light, one switch, right? I can put these two objects in a single actor. And then the blueprint is actually connect these two objects together. So we'll touch the switch, the light is on or off, right? And this actor can be used multiple times in the level. So if you consider I have many pairs of light and switch, right? I can drag this actor BP 10 times in the level. So I have these 10 pairs of light and switch interaction. And each of them is actually independent from each other. So one switch control one light. Okay. But still, this might have an issue if you want to have one light controlled by two switches, or one switch control two lights, right? So that complete complexity will make this one not really feasible for programming purpose. Okay, but you understand, the BP can be embedded into the actor. And the third option here is it's called a sequence BP. Basically, the sequence is a timeline, right? It's very similar like the video editing program like Adobe Premiere or After Effects. You have frames, you have frame 0 to frame, let's say 3000, right? It's like an animation timeline. Unreal allow you to put BP event on a particular time spot, right? So when the animation play and hit that frame, this action will be triggered. So for instance, if you in Unreal, you animated the camera flies through the scene, right? The first 100 frames is zoom in, then the next 100 frames is moved from one room to another, right? So you can make this action turn on the light associated with a sequence. So as soon as you get into the door, right, in frame, let's say 300, this event will be triggered, then the light will be turned on. Right? So this is called sequence BP. All right, so this is 3 locations you can, in general, you can put a BP script into. All right, so just keep in mind, the level is map. You can have multiple actors in the level. You can have actors interact to each other through some script. So this is actually another topic. I think is very confusing, but again, I want to just talk about this in a high level. right? So we already understand you put BP in the level, you put BP in one actor, right? And here I want to show you the other two scenarios, control the switch and light. This is actually more practical. In game design, I would say this two is very common compared with the first two. Here I like to talk a little bit more why. So in the method number 3, you put actor BP, you create actor BP called a light bulb. You create another actor BP called a switch. Okay, so this is two actors instead of one actor. And then you let these two actors communicate to each other. Right? So this is more flexible because you could have one switch control multiple lights. You can have one light controlled by multiple switch. You just need to set up a communication, right, between these two actors. So for example, the first approach is using custom event. This custom event is very similar, how to say that. If you think about the two actors, right, they need to communicate to each other. One is the messenger, okay? Another one we can call as a receiver, right? So one is messenger, another is receiver. And the messenger need to send the information to the receiver. In this case, the switch will send the instructions, right? Turn on the light, then the light bulb will be turned on, right? So that's kind of the relationship between these two. And custom event basically is a kind of associated with the messenger. So the messenger has to give instructions who are the receivers, right? You have to call the name of the receivers. In Blueprint, there is a script called call actors based on the name. Right? So it's basically that same thing is you have to call them the receivers, hey, turn on the light, please. Right? So the custom event basically just give the instructions, the signal, the message to the receiver. So this is one approach. In this approach, the messenger has to do a lot of work. Find the name, give instructions. Okay, so that is the relationship. And the last approach, this is also very common, is using dispatcher. Right, dispatcher is kind of opposite. Uh, the messenger don't have to do much work, but the receiver have to do a lot of work. Right. So basically, the messenger, the switch, will broadcast, hey, someone touched the switch, right? It just makes an announcement. And this announcement is public, is broadcasting to all the receivers, all the actors in the level. All right. So this is what the messenger will do. Really simple, just make announcement. And for the receivers, they have to do more job. They have to constantly listen who is doing the broadcast, if the broadcast is active or not, right? As soon as the receiver received announcement, then it's using the dispatcher to trigger the action. In this case, is turn on the light. Okay, and this scenario could be really useful. For example, you have one switch made this announcement, right? Switch is being touched. Then you can have multiple lights all have this kind of dispatcher to constantly listen, right? As soon as they hear the switch is on, they all turn on. So you have one switch turn on multiple lights. That makes sense. Other possibility could be when you push the switch is on, but other receivers could be the TV, right? You can have another actor called TV. The TV will be automatically on, or could be the air condition automatically on, or the coffee maker automatically on, right? So you can have multiple receivers. They all respond to the same messenger. So that is a benefit to use a dispatcher. If you want to do, for example, a smart building simulation, you want to do a simple action. As soon as people get into the room, right, the air condition is on, lights is on, TV is on, coffee maker is on, right? So all of these can be programmed respond to the single action, single messenger, which is the door being, the trigger being pushed or the door opened, right? So that is a benefit to use dispatcher. And back to the first one, the custom event, since the switch has to do a lot of work, this is more useful if you want to, the switch be very precise, control a particular actor. For example, if you have 100 lights, right, in your room, in the switch, you can specify which light you want to turn on, right? So in that scenario, I would use the custom event rather than use the dispatcher. But in most situations, these two can replace to each other. They all just have a different logic, but can achieve the similar result. All right, I think that's roughly the basics of blueprint. I think this might be sounds pretty confusing if you never do any blueprint before, never do programming before. This is basically similar like object-based programming. Like you can program an object. The object has some internal functions. The function is always associated with the object, right? This object, could be a teapot, could be a light. It has internal functions like, heating on, heating off, or turn on, turn off. It's very similar logic in that object-based programming. Okay, so any questions related to BP? I know this is a little bit too abstract, probably. All right.
I mean,
Well,
it
I
makes
will
sense.
just. It doesn't make
Sorry.
sense.
I mean, no, I mean, like, it made sense as you explained it. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, nice job. I don't know if I could explain that to somebody else as easily as you did, but
Okay. Good. Good. Yeah. Is a little bit easier if you understand or if you just think this as the messenger and the receiver. In most of the interactions in VR, AR, you have that relationship. When you grab an object, for example, the messenger will be the collision of your hand with the object, right? So the physics, they collide. So this is the trigger, the messenger. And the receiver will be the object. The object will say, hey, someone touched, the collision box. Then I will associate my orientation to the hand, right? So when you lift your hand, the object is, associated with your hand now. It's the same logic here. So messenger, receiver, that's how they communicate. There's actually more than these two methods. This two method is the most popular one, custom event and dispatcher. Uh, Depends on, the where or when you want to use it. In some game design, I can give you one example. In the game design, when you, let's say, in the final thing, you fight with a boss, right? A boss enemy. As soon as you, killed that monster at the end, right? The health of that monster is 0, right? So this is, the event. We can call this as a messenger. The monster died, which is the message being broadcast, right? So as soon as you broadcast that announcement, the remaining objects in the level could respond to the death of the monster. So for example, the gate could automatically open, or the light will be all on, or maybe the fireworks will all on, or the main actors, or some NPCs will trigger some defined animation to celebrate, right? So you can have a group of actors all respond to the death of the monster, which is a single message, the single message being pushed, and many reactions to it. In that case, oops, I would use the dispatcher to do it, right? So yeah, I think that is one example. And for the custom event, since the messenger has to do a lot of work, right? Let me think if there are any scenarios this could be useful. Yeah, it could be useful if you consider something like a puzzle game. Maybe you have multiple objects in the scene, depends on the switch, right? When you switch, there's only one object in that puzzle will be light up. But if you switch off, another object will be light up, right? So you can see the patterns. I mean, that could be the scenario, the situation using the custom event. You have to precisely program who are the receivers. You have to be super clear when you send the message. The message only sent to that actors, nobody else, right? So it's rather, it's not a broadcast. It's a single message delivered to a single person, to a few, um, predefined actors. Cool. All right. So just give you a couple of tutorials if you want to dive into a blueprint. The first one is a blueprint door. Is a pretty simple one. Basically using blueprint to trigger the open and close of a door. Right. So this is something like what I mentioned. When the collision of a character to the door automatically open. When you leave the door automatically close. So that's a simple one-on-one relationship. The second tutorial is on the light control. It's very similar like the one I just explained to you. And this one is basically using the custom event to control the light. So you can see my discussion on multiple switch, multiple lights, how you set up their relationship. And third tutorial is about dispatcher. This is the second video in that link. Basically, I controlled how to use dispatcher to swap the backdrop, so you can have a different environment by click a button. You can make announcement, change background. The background will be changed. Also, you can have the lighting change. You have some other thing like a particle or snow change at the same time. Level sequence is a tutorial talk about the sequence BP, how you can associate BP with a timeline. So when you play at some point, the BP will be triggered. Teleportation is another BP script. Multiple pawn control is another BP script. You can, teleport. You can swap from one character to another. Yeah, so these are the a little bit advanced tutorials for you guys. Okay, I think that's it about the scripting and node-based programming. I know it's a little bit too much stuff in a short time, but again, this seminar is not trying to teach you the skill, but rather get a big picture, right, of XR development. And this is actually I would say the essential part of the development. It's not just know how to do the 3D model. You have to know how to interact with the model and how to set up UI, how to set up user input, and how to communicate between the different actors. This is really, really the core of the developer.